Okay, hi region violinists. This is your help video for the Mazas 10 etude. So the first thing that you might notice is the direction that says vigorously with the point of the bow, and that is going to come into play when you are doing all of the notes with a staccato dot over it. The second thing I want to say is allegro non troppo. This translates into fast but not too much, which is kind of contradictory, but for this, we are saying that the maximum tempo that you should play it at is quarter note equals 110. Anywhere from 100 to 110 is what you want to aim for. But again, if the tempo that you can play this etude at really well is even less than that, we'd rather have you play it very accurately and super well in tune rather than playing it very fast. So if that means you need to go a little slower, that's totally fine. Okay, so the first things first, when you are playing at the point of the bow and you have all those staccato dots, this means that we are going to play in the marcato style. So it has length to the note, but each note starts and ends pretty clearly, and there's a little bit of space in between. So you should have a good amount of space. And I want you to just focus mainly on very clean string crossings. So you're going to notice that you are skipping over a string, and you have to practice that string crossing really intentionally. So I would just practice going between your open G and then your open A, and you have to grab the string with your bow by pressing into your index finger and your thumb. And that will make a clearer sound for you if you grip the bow and grip the string before you pull. The same thing goes when you're just doing normal string crossings between strings that are next to each other. It is even better when you do that across multiple strings, just so you have a clearer start. So I would really work on solidifying that skill across your open strings first, and then you can add in the notes. So a lot of what we have deals with a very solid hand shape. So if I play the first bar, you should notice that my wrist didn't really move much, and that is the point of this etude. You want to be able to do all of these accidentals, like the added sharps, added flats, without having to move your wrist around, because ideally you should be able to play these notes with a solid hand shape so it's more efficient for you. So if you go versus if you had like a very loose wrist and you're just jumping around like I over-exaggerated it, but you can kind of tell like it'll be harder for you to stay consistent with your intonation, especially when you try speeding it up. So you might as well just keep your wrist in the same place and just hop your fingers over. I really would suggest practicing everything in this etude slowly first. Even though it might feel a little painful, you just have to do it to build up the consistency. So yes, that is the first measure. Then we have your G sharp, your high 2, with your legato tenuto mark right above it. So you're going to play that long, and then you have 16th notes in a row. It's kind of hard to tell that there's 16th notes because like the printing of it is so close together, but those are 16th notes. So your rhythm is 1, 2, E, and a 3 is what it is. So you're going, and I want you to look at the 5th note of measure 2. It's on that F sharp. You should see a upside down skinny triangle, or maybe even like what looks like a compressed up bow. That is the marking for staccatissimo. So that means to play it very, very short. If you want to get used to that bowing style first, I would just do it on your open string. So you do long, long, short, long. And again, to get that short sound, it is really small amount of bow, and you dig into the string. It's like a little pinch with your index finger and your thumb. So you're going long, long, short, long. And try to make that note really short while it's still having a good sound to it so you can still hear the note. So when you play it together, and then the 8th rest at the end is important. It's more like a breath than anything to prepare you into the next measure, which is the start of the next phrase. So Okay, let's do the first two measures together. Ready, go. Good. Okay, so the next two measures, measure 3 and 4, you have the same concepts. You have G sharps. So on the D string, you have high 3. So really tuck your third finger underneath your fourth finger for that. And then high 2 on the E string. B, B, and then you shift up to third position here where you see that 1. And then this is going to be a C natural, so you're going to have big space between your 4 and your 3. So you just had your 4 down for that high D. The C is right below. Okay, this next note, it has a 4 and a 0 over it. This is going to be our harmonic. So if you have never played a harmonic before, you take the pad of your finger, usually your pinky, and you just lay it right in the midpoint between the bridge and the scroll. So this is the midpoint for my instrument, and you can pretty much tell on your own if you take the pressure of the pad of your finger really lightly and you drag it around where the midpoint is. It'll be really clear when you're in the right space because it'll start ringing a lot. So you can tell that's not quite it. Just scoot your finger until you find it. Like this is not it either. You always have to aim for that. And it should just sound like your open string, but an octave above. So yeah, you're gonna play your C natural with your 2. You're gonna stretch for that harmonic. And they want you to play your 4th finger for your D. So you're just extending your 4. Let me play it in tune. And then you're retracting your 4. So 4, 4, 3, and then you have that staccatissimo again. So super short, and then 1st finger for the A. So that 4th measure, you're going 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's just play that measure, okay? Ready, go. Okay, so I'm going to do the 3rd and 4th measure together. Ready, go. So a lot of what we have to pay attention to in this etude as well is our intonation. Because if you have noticed, the notes that are jumping back and forth are an octave apart, or they share the same note name and they should sound the same, but one of them is higher, one of them is lower. So take for example just the first 2 notes, low A versus open A. You have to make sure that that is really well in tune to your open A, because if you play your 1st finger too sharp, then it sounds not good. If you play your 1st finger too flat, it doesn't sound good. You're always trying to listen and see that your notes match next to each other. So you're playing A, A, and then C, C, E, E, A, A. And it's kind of just a matching game. Same thing goes for measure 3. E, E, G sharp, G sharp, B, B, and then D, D. Yeah. Okay, so the whole first line, let's play it together. We're going like this. Ready, go. Good. So now the next line, we are starting in that 3rd position. So you should have stayed there while you ended the 4th bar. And this is pretty straightforward with your rhythm. You just have all 8th notes until your last harmonic before the repeat. So we're starting in 3rd. Ooh, let me play that in tune. And then you shift down to 1st when you see that open E, so that you can play your low 2 and get ready for it. And then 4th finger A. Right here is where it's tricky. You have to shift right to 3rd position, back to that C. Ooh. I'm not playing my season tune today, sorry. Okay, but ultimately you would want to match the 1st note of that measure to the last note in terms of intonation, and still always make sure that you are playing with a good marcato bow at the upper half of your bow. So you're going shift. Okay, so you are shifting really quickly right there. So to practice that, the C to C, because again, you want that, it's a 2-octave jump. You want it to sound the same and be really well in tune with each other. You have to practice shifting to third. And a lot of the times we practice shifting with your first finger as your anchor. So I want you to go, and you're gonna pretend that there's an A right before the C, so that you can practice shifting to third, and then eventually you can speed up the length of that A until you don't hear it anymore. So if you look, my hand is still putting my 1 down, so I know that I'm in third position, but you just don't hear it. Okay, second measure. You can also do your harmonic here. It's not written, but you could do it. It's not a bad choice to do it. The other option is to press down on your finger and have it just a normal note. But then you just have to keep in mind you have to extend your pinky quite far. And I would keep my second finger down if I were playing my fourth finger as normal, so that I don't have to find it again after playing my 4. Again, always keep in mind your wrist and your elbow should be in line with each other. So I shouldn't see you going like this and like doing crazy things when you're trying to do your 2 to 4. But after you play that second beat, you're just shifting down to first again. So you're going 2, 2, shift down. So you're staying in first. Same thing for the next measure. So that one's a little bit tricky with the accidentals. Make sure you're at 2 is really high for your F sharp, E, and then you have low 2 for G, open A, and then F sharp, your high 1, and then B, high 3 for D sharp. So pretty tricky. I would practice that nice and slow with the good. And then I would also really make sure that you are practicing with the correct style, even though you're taking it slow. Okay, next measure. You have a slur written across the first two notes. However, they have staccato dots, so you're just gonna hook them together. Is how it should sound, instead of the slur would be weird as well across 2 strings, so you have to stop your bow. And then this, if you've never seen that tiny B with the tiny 8th note with the slash through it, that's a grace note. So you're going to barely hear that pitch before you go into the main one that it's connected to. So you should be hearing that B for a split second before going straight into your harmonic, is how it would be. So I would practice that quite a bit just to get used to that feeling. So let's see. I think it should land on down, down, up, down, up. So try to practice that nice and slow. Let's do the second line up until that harmonic. So we'll do from ready, go, second line. Okay, now let's do the first part, which is measure 1 all the way to that repeat sign together. Right, 1 and 2 and ready, go. And that's the first part. So this is now the second section, which starts in the last measure of the second line and goes until the end of the second measure of the fourth line. Okay, so luckily once you have that first part down, the rhythm doesn't really change. You just have the same 8th note pattern over and over. You are just practicing playing in tune with different finger patterns is what it is. So once you get used to the bowing style and the keeping the same hand shape, then it won't be too much of an issue to get more of your notes. So yeah, the rhythms are not that bad. That's the comforting thing about this. Okay, so let's start with that last measure of the second line. So we have C to C, E. So you should just shift to third position on that last C. I would also like to point out that there's a couple of different ways to play those octaves. If you would have just preferred going to third position right on the G, so maybe starting in first and then shifting to third right on the G, and then maybe going to second position for the CC, that's fine as well. It's honestly up to you and your own preference. You would just have to plan for how you're going to get into the next stuff. So I would personally not recommend going to second position there. I would just do the fingering that is on the page, trying to stay in first as much as possible, and then just shift to third because it keeps it kind of simpler. We have that C, C, E, E, G, G, C, C. Now we're on the third line. You still have that 1, 2, E, and a 3 rhythm. Okay, so let's just do that. If you noticed, we had to shift up. We were already in third. And by putting your first finger on the C, C natural, you're shifting up to fifth. So you're going quite high up on the fingerboard. Just a couple of reminders when you are shifting higher than third position, or just in higher positions in general. The higher you go, the more your thumb has to tuck a little bit under the fingerboard in order for your fingers to curl around and still be able to stay in tune. Because if your thumb was still hanging out here, it'll be like you can still play in tune, but then that's not good practice for when you do have to come up across the fingerboard and bring your elbow in and stuff when you do play even higher. And we do get even higher than fifth position in this piece. So I would suggest just playing with good posture integrity and just trying to make sure that your thumb is going a little bit under. You're bringing your elbow in as soon as you are shifting to fifth. Okay, so again, try to practice that slowly so that you can get really good intonation. And we're back to the octaves. So open G. And then F natural is your low 1 on the E string. And then again with a 1, 2, E, and a 3. Again, try to make sure the staccatissimo is really short. Okay, now we have your shift up to your harmonic. So you're really just popping up there for a second, okay? Now for your C, it's marked with a 4. And that's just going to be an extension. So the difference between an extension and a shift for us is if we shift, that means we are taking our thumb with us and it's your whole hand moving up or down the fingerboard. If you're doing an extension, the rest of your hand basically stays in the same place. You're just stretching that one finger up. Or if it was your first finger and you're doing a backward thing here, then you would shift your finger down. But you're just sticking your finger out, so it's extending past its normal range. It can feel a little bit weird, but we can technically do your extension without it being too much of an issue. And it's easier to do an extension there than to shift. So starting at right there on that open A, I would really try to make sure that your thumb is anchored in the same place. And then you got another G, F, A, F, E. And then another extension. So that one's on your A string. You're just reaching up to, which should sound like your low 1 on the E string, but you're playing it with a high 4 or an extension 4 on the A. A lot of extensions in that one. Be careful about your fourth finger intonation, but try to make sure that the rest of your hand is staying as stable as possible. And it's okay if like your hand has to rotate a little bit. Personally, my pinky is too short for me to just be able to smack it down and be in tune. So I do have to rotate a little bit, but my thumb isn't moving. I'm just pivoting, and that's what makes it okay. And it's like the rest of my hand is stable because I just rotate back and it's fine. Okay. So now we're on the fourth line. We're continuing with your octaves. And then we have your G sharp. Shift up to your harmonic again. Or if you follow the fingering up there, you can just stay in third position. You have to extend your fourth finger for the harmonic, but then you can stay in third. You just have to make sure your high four for your G sharp is really well in tune. Okay, and then you repeat that again. So let's play that second section together. So this is starting in the last measure of the second line. Okay, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Shift. Shift back down, go. Low 1. Now harmonics. And then shift. Oh, not shift, extend. Sorry. Extend. Stay. Stay in there. And you would repeat that section. Okay, so that's the second one. On to the third. Okay, so this is the third section starting in the third measure of the fourth line. Okay, so now we are in A major. The notes should look very similar to the beginning because they should be the same, except now you have F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. So you have to be careful, especially about your high threes on the G string, and then high twos on the A string, high twos on the E string. Okay, so we're starting on A, and then now high 3, and high 2. Always remember that staccatissimo, very short. Okay, now E. Now shift up to third, and then C sharp this time. So tuck your third finger right underneath your 4. And then harmonic. So again, that harmonic, you're just sliding back to third position. Always make sure that your thumb and maybe even your first finger knuckle, if your hand is like mine, that they just stay in the same place so that you could just throw your hands down and it should be in tune. Okay, now we have the hardest leap of the entire etude in this next measure of line 5. So if you can't tell, if we count up to that note, it should be a G natural. So ultimately, you want it to sound like an octave above your low 2 on the E string. Or even, you can just use your open G as a reference. But you want to match that first, and then try to get that pitch in your ear before you try putting it in context. And another thing that I want to mention real quick is if you look right underneath that G natural, there's an F and a Z right next to it. That means forzando. It should be like a strong explosion of sound, and it's going to be, but it's not as bitey as an accent might be. It's just, and you mostly do it with bow speed and then also digging into your bow a little bit, but it's not going to be the same like harsh sound as an accent. So, and if you can do vibrato, that would be a great place to put it. Just so it emphasizes the ringing of the sound even more. Okay, so you are playing that G. Now, this is the only fingering that I do not like that is printed. Personally, I do not like how they have you go to a 3 for E and then another 3 for the C sharp. I think that's too much shifting, especially when you go at a faster tempo. So I think it's better if you just stay in position and then you do it 2. So open 4, 2, and then you shift 3, 1, and then you stay. So G natural, and then fourth finger on the D string for C sharp. And then when you see that next 1 for your F sharp, it's not actually going to be on your first finger, on your first position, F sharp. They want you to go from 3, third position, up to 5th. Just so your hand can stay up there and you go 1, 3, 2, 4 instead of 1, 1, and then you have to like shift up here. So let's let's see, that's the third measure of the fifth line. So let's start on that D and then shift up, F sharp, A, D, and then F sharp. And a lot of those pitches are very easily comparable with your open strings. So your D, and then you shift up to your F sharp. You can even play your open D with that too. And then your third finger A should make your instrument ring. So that D matches with your open D. And then that F sharp should be in tune. It's just an arpeggio. Okay, and you also have a forzando underneath that last F sharp too. Yeah. And before we move on to the next part, I will just say that that leap from the open to the G natural is literally the hardest intonation thing that you can do in this piece. So I would really recommend doing it very slowly and practicing it over and over consistently first, and really aiming for perfect intonation on the G. So it's not even starting from that A, you have to start the measure before, because you have to make sure that you are starting in third position. At least start with that A in third position, and then you go up. And if you notice, I did the same anchor thing. So I have to put my finger I have to put my finger on where D would be. Sorry, that took me a second. But because ultimately you should be shifting to sixth position in order for you to play that G natural in tune. So you're shifting from third to sixth. So is something that I would practice a lot. So your first finger in third position, A, then you shift up to a G with your first finger, and then you lay it down, 4. And remember, the higher you go on your fingerboard, the closer your fingers come together. So you're gonna notice that when you walk up your fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a lot smaller space between your fingers than when you were down here. So even just that, you can see the space between 1 and 4 quite different. And that's just the physics of your instrument. So you just have to practice staying up here and living up there by playing really well in tune. So just walk up and down. And then you could shift down to third again. And I would do that as an exercise. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 2, 1, 1. Just to try to get that third to sixth shift really well in your hands, and then you can minimize it and go back and forth like that, and then you should be able to play the shift pretty accurately by still putting your anchor finger down but not playing it. So while you're doing your anchor finger, you just play your open A, because that's what's written. Okay, so enough about that one shift. We gotta keep going. So this is the fourth measure of the fifth line. Okay. You're immediately shifting from first to third, so that's a whole other thing too. You can shift with your anchor finger again. Anchor finger on your E, your A on the E string. Sorry, I completely played the wrong notes right there. But E. For your G sharp, they want you to stay in position, which is fine. I want you to also make sure it's a high enough 4 for your G sharp. And then your E is your 2. 1 for D. B is what will feel like a high 3. And then G sharp is just your high 1. And then you have open 8 right after it. And I would just shift down for the C natural, and then shift back up during that open E to third. And then you play your C natural. So those two measures are not that bad. Let's just do those two together. So this is measure 4 and 5 of the 5th line. Okay, ready, set, go. Really practice that one for your high 4s, okay? And then this last line is strange because if you notice, you're holding your 3rd finger down on your E string A, and your 1 is going back and forth between a low 1 to a normal 1, and then low 2. So you're doing essentially this movement. I would practice maybe just the bottom notes first and ignore the top A's. So you're going D sharp, which is your low 1, scoot it up to an E, F natural is your low 2, back to E, and then scoot it back, D sharp, open D, and then C sharp is your high 3, and then back to open D. So I would get really comfortable with that. And then I would try to add in your 3rd finger staying down. Okay, so we are starting with your D sharp. And that's the one that changes. You have to be careful that your G sharp, which is the and of 2 of the 2nd measure, that has to change to a G sharp. So high 2 on the E string, and then you're using your 3rd finger to play your high 3 on the G string for your C sharp, and then you pop it back to normal 3, and then open, and then your 1st finger stays in 1st, you're shifting up for that harmonic, and then you immediately go back to 3rd. High 4, 1, 3, open. During that open E, you're shifting a 3rd. And this arpeggio can be kind of tricky to get in tune because you do have to do that extension for your pinky as well. You just want to try your best to get it consistent. Okay, and then you would have to do that whole repeat. So this is going to be that 3rd section all together, starting with the 3rd measure of the 4th line. Okay, 1 and 2 and ready, go. Shift up. Now steady. Hold your 3 down. And that should be the end of it. Just one quick thing that I remembered to talk about while I was playing that. In the 2nd measure of the last line, I would really suggest keeping your high 2 down for your G natural, your G sharp that you played on the E string. So you would just open, high 2, keep it down so that when you do your high 3, you have a reference to put your 3rd finger back down to the A, and it should be really well in tune because you just squeeze your fingers together. And then you stay in position. And you try to get that high E in tune. Yeah, but I hope that was helpful. The last thing to think about and to take your playing to the next level is just to try to add some dynamics. I tried to emphasize them more when I was playing the fast up to speed excerpt reference. But you will notice that especially during that in the last line, you want to try to go move with the line. So the bottom notes, you want to crescendo and then decrescendo with them. And you can do that for all of the octave ones as well. So if the pitches get higher, you're going to crescendo. Or you can choose to do whatever makes sense to you musically. But a good rule of thumb is if the pitches get higher, you usually want to crescendo. If the pitches get lower, you might want to decrescendo. But the exception is if you're going down to the G string, sometimes people want to do the opposite and you want to crescendo down to that. So what I'm thinking about right there is this first measure of the second line. Some people would want to really emphasize that low C. Some people would want to take it away. But it's really up to you. And I wish you a lot of good luck for Region, and I hope that you make it so I can see you there. All right, bye.